There's two interesting problems that can be solved with analyzing the current hype around generative AI by reframing it into a hypothesis and looking at the system and comparing it to, let's say, for example, a Pirate Bay type full text search engine. So we could say this is a null hypothesis problem that is currently happening with AI. So, one, do we think that AI is intelligent? I would say no, it is not intelligent. It's more similar to a search engine. And then, second, is it okay to train on intellectual property of other people without getting their consent? In both cases, we could compare this to a null hypothesis. So we could say, if I just took all of the books and the movies and the source code of every single thing on earth, let's say I even broke into companies and stole their trade secrets, I stole their proprietary source code, I grabbed the proprietary source code for Apple's operating system, Microsoft's operating system, mainframe operating systems. I grabbed all kinds of, full self-driving code, code to embedded devices, and I had all that into a search engine, as well as, for example, books and movies, etc. Would that actually be pretty useful to many people? I would say probably be pretty useful. So we can reframe looking at this transformative effect of generative AI by reframing the problem into, what could it potentially also be like? So in the case of the hypothesis that it's very similar to a Pirate Bay full text search engine, then things get a little bit more interesting. Now let's for a second explain this concept of hypothesis testing. Really, the easy way to think about this in a very simplified way would be to look at a disease. Let's say it's, in the case of syphilis, something that's actually happened in the past where there was a treatment for syphilis. You were able to give antibiotics and people were cured of syphilis. This was a huge advancement in medicine. But we knew that there was some extremely unethical testing that occurred during the syphilis experiments that occurred in the United States, where they gave people who were of African American ancestry a placebo, told them they were getting a treatment, then studied them, and they were able to measure the effects of the actual real treatment. So in this case, that would be massively unethical. And in fact, it was massively unethical, but it proves the point of a placebo versus an actual treatment. Because in the case of that particular disease, the treatment is so effective that it's obvious when you give someone a sugar pill, for example, the placebo, that there was an effect of the antibiotics. If we also look in a similar way then at this concept of, is AI A, intelligent, and B, is it transformative? For example, couldn't it just be similar to a full text search engine? Things get pretty interesting, right? So if we do a hypothesis test and we say, well, let's do a study, right? Let's go ahead and grab every different component of intellectual property. Again, everybody's books, everybody's movies, everybody's source code, everybody's trade secrets, put it into a search engine. I think it would actually be pretty similar to many of the use cases of what people are currently doing with large language model chatbots. And so here's where we get into the details and demystify things a little bit. What's confusing about people's use of these chatbots is that they do so many different things that it all together appears to be magic. But if you decompose it into sections, and let's just for a second focus only on code, then it gets a little bit easier. So in the case of code, if you had a search engine that had, again, all of the code that's ever been written on Earth, and you search for a function in Python that was able to add two numbers together, you would get a really good result. In fact, you could just copy paste that into your project, and the likelihood would probably be 99.999%. The first time you put it into your program would run. Similarly, if we look at other kinds of well-known algorithms like map reduce or compression, or even optimization problems like greedy coin problem or traveling salesman problem, right? There's all these well-known solutions that if you had a full text search engine, you could literally copy paste most languages inside, and that potentially could solve, let's say, 80% of the use cases that people are currently doing with these coding assistants for AI. So I think it does allow you to reframe the problem and demystify the large language models as a coding tool, to reframe it as what would be the alternative and how much better is it than the alternative. And from an intellectual standpoint, thinking about getting rid of all IP law. Let's say that you wanted that. I would disagree with this, but let's say that you wanted that and then you were going to allow people to search over it. Is it actually that much different than many of the use cases that people are using? Obviously, it's not going to be all of the use cases, because one of the things that is useful is natural language processing gets converted into a proper search term. That's pretty useful, but that itself is a separate use case than taking some code and pasting it into a program. Likewise, it's useful to be able to take some words that are stored as a video or stored as some audio and then convert that into text. But that itself is a very different use case than, hey, here's some code that I would like to swap. Give me the answer for what an add function is. Okay, let's go ahead and put that into my code and run it. So I think this is a great way to really dive into some of the details and really demystify the problems that we're solving, is to think about the hypothesis, think about the alternative. And in many cases, if you're able to even break down each of the different use cases of what a large language model does, it really does start to demystify and get us back to where we were with regular software algorithms versus machine learning. And this was a classic problem with machine learning operations, which was before a lot of the stuff that we're doing with large language models. Is a common problem that people encountered was that everyone wanted to use machine learning because machine learning can create very good predictions, but the majority of problems don't require machine learning. So if you can frame it without using machine learning, you can lower the technical debt and you can also make things more deterministic. And similarly, if we then think about the problem in the case of the null hypothesis of, isn't this really just like a Pirate Bay search engine? You can see that, in fact, that could in fact be very similar to many of the use cases that people are currently using these chatbots with. So I thought I would throw this idea out there for the internet to think about, is what would happen if we started to demystify, break down, and even think about the null hypothesis for artificial intelligence with these large language models. Could we actually get to a better understanding of what they're actually good at and where the weaknesses lie?